Salutations, fellow nerds. I'm Rick Y, the wise guy. And today is December 12th, 2024, and I'm starting to see a pattern that was made time and time again over the past few years by the media. And if it turns out to be the same way, no matter what kind of hopeful messaging they're trying to bring to the topic, like Charlie Brown to Lucy's football, they're setting it up to be punted, knowing full well they'll be pulling it out from their viewers' feet. Because they're trying to make it appear as though there's some kind of legislative contingency to Trump's worst behavior. At least the folks that they're giving a lot of credence to have never shown to have the courage to do the right thing in the past when the time came. So, if you enjoy news, history, and Americana, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you want real-time updates, diddle that little notification bell. I'd be much obliged. And please don't mind the engine roar of the fighter jets overhead. Recently, a scheme, as it were, to derail Trump's cabinet nominees has come to light in the media. At this point, it's already made its way over to the desk of my besties over at Morning Joe. And one of their contributors, Caddy K, mentioned it and detailed how Senator John Thune plans on coordinating some kind of rotation with other senators to vote against certain nominees. And maybe it's a bias on my part, but again, I don't buy it. And I'm seeing excuses and explanations instead of editorializing on the truth. This is now becoming insanely frustrating because it's clear how open they are with simply preparing their audience for some kind of inevitable outcome instead of speaking on how poor each of the candidate nominations happens to be and why. The Overton window with Morning Joe wasn't a slide to the right. It was a ski slope. The strategy is fairly simple and so open now that I can't see them really pulling it off. You see, he and each member of a list of like centrist Republicans are planning on voting against nominees, but in rotation, wherein like Joni Ernst would join him to vote against a nominee, and then Tom Tillis would then join him later on to go against a different nominee, and then so that like this would go around so that they could equally spread out the blame instead of putting the political heat on just one or a few of the senators. The strategy is actually fairly simple and so out in the open now that I'm not really even sure the Senate's going to be able to pull it off. You see, John Thune, and each of the members of the centrist Republican senators are planning on voting against nominees, but in like a rotation, right? So he and then Joni Ernst would vote against one nominee, and then later on, when it was time for another nominee, he would join Tom Tillis, and they would vote against the nominee so that they could kind of equally spread out the blame instead of putting all of the political heat on one or just a few Republican senators. First, let me clarify my supreme lack of confidence in senators like Tom Tillis and Joni Ernst and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. Not just in their inability to ever do the right thing when the time calls, but that the pressures now are arguably greater from both the base and the senators. These four people have been nothing but a disappointment for the hopeful Democrat or the enlightened centrist since they joined the legislature. I will say, if there is one solid thing they are good at, it's stringing along their voters, at least through the media, and then disappointing them in the end with the vote. I sincerely don't expect them to be any different now than they have been in the past. And I'm not trying to be this like doomy, gloomy guy here, but I don't want to get people's hopes up on things that these people have never come to help us out on in the past. And if you're looking for a good example of this, Joni Ernst, pardon me, who is just beside herself over the accusations of Pete Hegseth, so much so that she refused to commit to supporting him. You know what else she didn't do? Refused to commit to not supporting Pete Hegseth. Sounds confusing, I know. And if you want the strategy for this little game that they like to play, this is one of them. It isn't exactly what politicians say, it's what's not said as well. Let's just say I'm going to approach all of them with a little, I'll believe it when I see it vibes. The reason why I say this is because more recently, she's just confirmed that she will, after much deliberation, pressure from Trump allies and donors, back the nomination of Pete Hegseth, in spite of the fact that nothing has changed about her concerns of his allegations. He's still a rapist. But I want to actually go back to the delivery of this information on Morning Joe. Because instead of pushing back, there seems to be this sense of explanatory normalization on behalf of both Joe and Mika. 8 months ago, when Trump was nominated, they had no qualms with appearing on their show and openly slammed those who were knowingly voting for a fascist and voting for a racist. Those are quotes. But now, when it comes to his equally terrible cabinet picks and distributing the fury of MAGA equally so as not to cause a stir, Joe Blow Hardborough immediately followed it up with his insightful analysis. He went on to say, by the way, this would happen all the time in the House where, somebody would say, I cannot vote against the 5 of these bills. I'll take these 2, you take those 2, you take that one. Then there's a rotation. So when you go back to your district, you go back to your state, you can go, I voted against one of his selections. And the whole time, while Joe Blow Hardborough went through his explanation, his wife, Mika Brzezinski, sat by and nodded and even chimed in. Yeah, that makes sense. When it comes to bills in the House, it does make sense. But this is just a reminder real quick. This is the Senate, and they're voting on cabinet members. They're either in or they're out. Simply not voting the way you feel is best, which is why you were put into office, is now the expectation. If a senator feels as though there is credible reason to vote against a candidate, they should vote against the candidate, right? But what Joe and Mika are actually trying to do in this case is normalizing the senators, tricking the voters into thinking that they're actually much bigger pieces of shit than they really are. They're saying that senators should not only go against their own moral positions and reject doing the right thing so as not to anger their base, but it makes sense. Now, it would appear to me that the bigger story here is that so many senators actually don't realistically feel comfortable putting their names on the nomination of certain people, and instead shining a light on why they feel this way. They would rather keep their heads down and do as they're told. Now, I may be totally off base here, but doesn't the threat of not having the number of votes in the Senate kind of force the incoming president to choose somebody who's more, appropriate for the position? I'm just getting the impression that instead of pushing back against what is clearly a swampy strategy to avoid backlash for shitty decisions and behavior, the Morning Joe crew would rather tell you that it's perfectly fine for this, at least. This way we can hopefully slide every nominee through right along narrow party lines, boosting those ratings with another horse race without any of us taking the fall for it. You know, have my trough and eat out of it too. I don't know why I want legacy media to come back and say this was all just some big mistake. I don't know what it is. I feel as though we're not going to get the full picture from those that we have entrusted to do just that. Their attitude and tone overall changing just so drastically after Trump won the election has been stark. But it's clear that it wasn't a fluke. No longer can we depend on any of these corporate entities to deliver the hard facts. They're in it to try and explain and rationalize the irrational, to obfuscate through doublespeak and gaslighting. This editorializing of Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski has just finally reached its point, at least for me. I can honestly say that if they truly wish to ever deliver information to my ears without a tremendous amount of skepticism toward their intentions on my part, they're going to have a big hill to climb. Less than a year ago, they were warning of the wolves in the fields. Now it seems as though they're welcoming them into everyone's homes. Not sure, going forward, how much more of these two I can cover. Because honestly, I don't know if I can stomach it. I can't condone the spinning of how things should operate in a just society, and so I'm not going to tolerate their attempts at easing us into a geyser pool like it's some kind of warm bathtub. We need to hold their feet to the fire and call out what should be known to the voters of these senators and lawmakers, and to do otherwise is shameful. So going forward, I look forward to walking this road of independent media with all of you. Because with this and the apparent tacit acceptance of racism that even the Young Turks have also demonstrated, man, in the words of L. Ron Halfhelven of Rivendell, our list of allies grows thin. So we need to continue to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay decent. Until next time. Peace!